Hey everyone, today's video is going to be a bit more casual than the ones that I've been producing recently. Some of you have been asking for this for a while, and it's basically a look into every relevant speedrun tech in Destiny 2. So not just movement. I know, for example, Savage Bull made a movement guide recently that was pretty cool. So shout out to him if you're interested in a little bit more depth for movement tech. But this is basically when you're looking to speedrun a raid or a dungeon or really anything, what are the tools that you have available to you? And I think that if you have a lot of experience and you've run a bunch of raids or you've run a bunch of dungeons, whatever, this kind of comes naturally to you, but actually crystallizing it and talking about it in explicit terms is not something that I've really seen in any video so far. So today I wanted to go over basically everything that a speedrunner might have at their disposal when it comes to analyzing an encounter and trying to optimize it. And of course, even if you're not a speedrunner, this is plenty of application in D2, especially some of the stuff that is not super movement related. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. I might have missed a couple things here when it comes to some really intricate movement stuff, like small interactions. But I'll make a video later on about like the intricacies when it comes to movement and how to basically like not suck at jumping puzzles and routing your own movement. But for now, let's talk about what we have normally, what we have just typically at a base level. So first we have movement. So I've split up movement into 5 categories here. We have grappling, Mountaintop, skating, Sparrow, and miscellaneous. So let's start with, let's go alphabetically, right? So let's start with grappling. Okay, so grappling, the first thing I want to look at is Grapple Ascension. So this is what Grapple Ascension looks like, right? So a Grapple Ascension is often used when you don't have a sword and you are on Prismatic instead, because Prismatic tends to be better for mechanics than like stasis. And then obviously in this clip, the person here has a Galahorn on, right, for ad clear in the Shorochi encounter. So you'll see here, they grapple and they ascension, and if you ever ascension normally without grappling, it doesn't take you very far. But grappling, especially at an angle and allowing yourself to swing and have kind of 2 vectors of velocity pulling you at a faster rate than if you were to just grapple straight forward, really allows you to pull that momentum through and just swing through and get a nice ascension out of it. So ascension carries momentum from a bunch of different things, and grapple is one of them, right? And doesn't require any sword or anything special, just requires you to have ascension on and to have grapple. So this is fairly useful, and it's used in some solos and like low mans as well. So speedrunning, we don't use grapple ascension that much, but you certainly can. So this is grapple ascension. And then I did mention that ascensioning does carry momentum, right? So let's go ahead and look at another example here. So this is a tech we're going to talk about later, but you'll see here, grapple to something really fast, and then boom, right? So the ascension, there's a lot of animations in Destiny that have these kind of end frames that fix your velocity to a certain limit, and ascension is not one of those things. So no matter how fast you're really going, ascension does allow you to kind of keep some of the momentum and keep going forward. And so that's why, even though this person was grappling very, very quickly and to a very, very fast projectile, they were able to keep their momentum using ascension, right? Okay, next we have rocket grapple. Now, there was some tech recently that was discovered that makes horizontal rocket grappling really, really easy. Now, vertical rocket grappling, you could do basically 100% consistently. You just like stare straight up, you shoot, and then you instantly grapple. And if you're pretty fast with your hands, it's like, it's pretty consistent. Horizontal rocket grappling required like a little bit of mouse movement and crouching and stuff. But there's recently a way found in the game files using CVARs to triple bind buttons to basically make rocket grappling horizontally 100% consistent, because when you open your menu or you open like your inventory, whatever, any menu, including like the escape menu, it cancels the recoil of weapons. And so the problem with rocket grappling was that there was a little bit of recoil, which made it so that you would miss your grapple by a slight amount when you shot your rocket and tried to grapple instantly. Whereas with vertical, you don't need to worry about recoil because weapons don't have recoil when you're shooting straight up, right? So take a look here, right? Bang. And look at that, right? Horizontal rocket grappling is very, very potent. You can see it's pretty straightforward to use it in like a realistic scenario here. And you can see that this person chains them back to back using Widow's Silk on Strand. And they basically skip the vast, vast majority of this transition. They swap to stasis here, obviously, to finish off. But it's not infeasible at all in a speedrun to start on Strand if you're rallying, somewhere. And then, you use both the grapples that you get for free. And then, of course, you can swap to stasis whenever. And you don't need any abilities on stasis to shatter skate. So pretty straightforward. And then we have Alethonym grappling, which is the thing that I was showing you earlier with the Grapple Ascension clip, which is, pretty much the same thing. And it does break pretty quickly because Alethonym, the projectile, moves faster than a rocket, so it will actually outpace your ability to grapple. But as long as you ascension fairly early, you can carry a lot of momentum. And as you can see here, that takes you to the plate in VOG very, very quickly. Okay, and then the last two we have are Lumina grappling, which was pretty popular. If you guys remember, like the Zemo, Snazzy Rock Warlords Ruin solo era, where people were Lumina grappling a lot, got a lot of attention around that time. So Lumina grappling, I don't really see a reason to do it that much anymore because Rocket grappling and Alethonym grappling are a lot more prominent now, especially with the use of Seavor's triple binding. But it's still useful. And obviously it can still take you some pretty long distances, but it is definitely noticeably slower than the other tech that I've been mentioning. Then we have Wanderer grappling, which if you guys have seen Crota record, this was used extensively in Crota. However, I don't imagine that this is that useful anymore, given that Lumina and of course Alethonym and Rocket grappling are a lot more potent, right? So Wanderer grappling, just using the Wanderer aspect and grappling to your own tangle. Okay, so that's it for grappling. Grappling has become a fairly significant part of speedrunning now. When it first released in Lightfall, people were a little skeptical on its usage because you couldn't be on a skating class with it. I mean, I guess you can strand skate technically on Hunter, but besides that, people were mostly on Well or on Stasis. But yeah, it's definitely seen some usage, and of course, you can swap to Stasis if you're on Hunter and still skate right away, like I mentioned. Okay, so let's move on to our next category, which is Mountaintop. Okay, the first clip I want to show you is something called Mountaintop Ascension. Okay, and you might be thinking Mountaintop plus Ascension. I mean, that doesn't sound particularly crazy, but this does give you a lot of vertical height very, very quickly, a lot of vertical momentum very quickly, as you can see there. And the way that this is done is you hold jump, so you jump, and at the very apex of your jump, you shoot Mountaintop and then instantly Ascension. So you're back to back right away. Okay, so it's tight inputs just like skating. You jump, and at the apex of your jump, you shoot Mountaintop straight down and then instantly Ascension, like right after. And if you do it right, you get a lot of height. And then, of course, here this is a fast way of getting to the second puzzle, which is a strat that we used when we were running Wish here. So this right here is a literal example of how the tech might be used in an encounter, when you don't want to be on stasis because Prismatic is more important for your abilities during mechanics. Next, we have Mountaintop jumping, which is, I'm sure you've seen this before, but a lot of people honestly don't know how to do this properly. I would say if there's two techs that you should know about, even as a non-speedrunner, to play endgame Destiny effectively, there's well skating, shadow skating, or just being decent with an eager edge sword moving horizontally. And then there's Mountaintop jumping, just knowing how to use Mountaintop fairly competently, right? So here, there's Mountaintop jumping. There's also Mountaintop wall boosting or wall hopping, which is basically just pressing space in Mountaintop as you're jumping up a wall here. So you can see that this person does that effectively here. And then, it's basically just using Mountaintop to get high height. This doesn't have a particularly high skill ceiling or anything. It's not that hard, but a lot of people don't know how to time it correctly. So yeah, Mountaintop jumping is pretty important. And then next we have Mountaintop boosting. Mountaintop boosting is honestly, I think, underutilized in speedrunning. A lot of people could use it more. But basically what it is just Mountaintop gives you a lot of momentum, and a lot of people use it vertically, but you can use it horizontally too. A lot of speedrunning routing is designed around the fact that eager edge has a cooldown, right? And you can't be eagering everywhere. So when your eager edge is on a cooldown, right, you can use your Mountaintop instead as a pseudo eager if you have the right map geometry to aim it off of. So this person kind of uses that quite effectively here. Just bang, backward, nice little Icarus dash there. Yeah, pretty extreme usage here. Usually it's a little bit more subtle and it's used for corrections, but certainly an example of Mountaintop boosting. Okay, next we have skating, which is a classic. We have a lot of stuff in the skating category actually. So let me go ahead and open that folder on my second monitor here. Let's start with air skating. These are alphabetical, so they're not merely going to make sense, but let's start with air skating. So there's a bunch of different names for this. I don't think there's an official name for it. I call it an aerial skate or a jumping light attack skate or something. I don't know. Skating over an object, whatever you want to call it. So it's not this part. This is just a regular skate into a bounce. But right here, you'll see this person throws a dusk field, a touch of winter dusk field, right? So it makes a little crystal on it. And then they skate over it. You see that? They skate over it. Let me actually... the reason why I'm showing you these videos manually instead of editing something is because of this. I want to show you individual moments here. So let me actually slow this down. So right here, okay? So you can basically skate in this game off of any object that's not a hard 90 degree, even 90 degree objects. If you have a really precise time, you can do it. So basically imagine, right, that when you skate in Destiny, right, you have a sword, right? And your light attack still lunges you forward if you're in the air, but your heavy attack doesn't, right? So you can take advantage of this by making your light attack skate happen in the air over an object. Okay, so what I mean by that is imagine you have a curved object like this, right? And your character, when you jump, you can left click, you can light attack to force your character over this object. So I'm sure you know that if you swing a sword into like a curved object like this in Destiny, your character will get forced over it. And so you can use this fact. Destiny thinks, by the way, when you like sword into like a curved object like this, that you're standing on the object temporarily. So it allows you to skate if you simply light attack, and then during your light attack contact with this area, like as you pass over, you can just do the jump and shadow dive inputs, and it will allow you to skate over an object. Obviously, you can do this on Warlock too. So you'll see this, like as we go forward to frame advance, the object gets created, this person swaps to their sword, and then you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. There's a curve, and they sword over the curve, right? They sword over the curve, and they do their inputs here and allows them to skate. And this actually goes further than like a normal light attack skate, because the momentum is like a little bit different with how you interact when you're in the air versus when you're on the ground, right? Because a light attack when you're grounded, if you ever try just like jumping a light attacking versus, grounded light attacking, the momentum, the animation is different, right? So you get the faster animation of the aerial light attack, and you actually still get the skate as well. So you take a look at that, boom, right? And that obviously looks faster than like a normal light attack. And then they go back to doing the rest of their route. Okay. Next, we have Blade Focus, which is the new dungeon armor set, Sage Protector. Blade Focus allows you to do a lot of cool stuff. Now, because it does require like a little bit of setup with blocking, you need like a crystal or an enemy or whatever, it's not feasible everywhere. But this is a good example of using a crystal with Blade Focus to achieve a much longer than normal skate, right? So for those of you that don't know, Blade Focus can actually be combined with Eager Edge, right? So the way that you actually do this is by swapping perks. So right now, right, Hash is going to left click with Blade Focus, and he doesn't have Eager Edge. He doesn't have Eager Edge on his sword, and he's going to swap and put Eager Edge onto his sword using a loadout. Okay, so the Slammer, the Eager perk, the alternate perk column actually is the one with Eager in it. So you can swap your perk to something else, right? So as he's approaching here, he has no Eager Edge. He swapped to the sword while he was flying through the air, no Eager Edge. He procs Blade Focus, and the act of switching perks doesn't remove Blade Focus. So now you'll see on his screen, he has Blade Focus and Eager Edge. And this allows him to get a crazy fast skate. Both of the velocities boosts add together. And so he blink swaps here, which we're going to talk about later. But yeah, that allows him to get all the way across the Tomb Ship's transition for the most part, and go over the right side and, make it to the end of the ships. Okay, so that's one application for Blade Focus. Another one is with Relics. So Blade Focus, there's a variety of ways that, it gets removed from your character. If you swap weapons, it gets removed. If you swing it all, it gets removed. But if you pick up a relic with Blade Focus active on a sword, this is what happens. So you can pick up a relic, and as you can see here, this person is able to keep Blade Focus active repeatedly for multiple swings. So this is useful for, honestly, a variety of different relics in this game. Anything that you can basically interact with while you're holding your own sword. And for whatever reason, Blade Focus doesn't think that you've stowed the sword, and you can just keep it on the relic. So pretty helpful stuff. A lot of places in Destiny where speedrunners need to carry relics that have some sort of swing animation, and a lot of these relics, because you can't use Eager Edge with them, it's nice to be able to transfer Blade Focus onto them and use them, because Eager Transfer got patched, which is an old tech where you used to actually be able to transfer Eager Edge onto a relic. So pretty cool stuff. Next, we have Blade Focus with Worldline. Now, this is not actually a skate. This is an example of, just Blade Focus Worldline being used, but you can certainly skate with this as well. And I'm sure you've probably seen the clips on Twitter and whatnot of people doing like DSC entrance with Blade Focus Worldline, because it does take you a lot further than like a normal slammer heavy attack. But in this particular instance, we're using it during an encounter, actually. So during mechanics. So in Vault, formerly what you would do is you would boop this captain with tractor cannon to the wall, and then he would be killed, and you would blink through as the wall was closing. Now what you can do is just Blade Focus the relic out. So you can see here that the captain gets killed, the wall is about to close. I interact and right click at the same time, and it allows me to kind of tear through the wall as it's closing up, and then I just kind of slam here. So this is just an example of Blade Focus Worldline. I couldn't really find a clip of like any run using Blade Focus Worldline for like skating, but I hope you get the idea. I mean, this can also be used for mechanics as well. Okay, next we have a classic bounce. So bounces are basically literally just hurling your character into slanted geometry and bouncing. So you could bounce sideways, you can bounce down. Almost all the time people are talking about bouncing up because you want height. And usually with heat rises, because that allows you to actually carry momentum with your bounce. If you want an example of a bounce where you don't use heat rises, Salvation's Edge 0-1. So, Salvation's Edge entrance on Hunter, there's a bounce people do where it sends them up, and it can only go so far, but they only need that amount of height. Whereas with Warlock, because you have heat rises, you can basically go up as long as you have heat rises, right? So let's take a look. This is one of the most classic bounces ever. If you know about D2 speedrunning at all, you definitely know what this is. But this is Garden of Salvation 3-4. One of the most classic bounces just in Destiny skips in general. Yeah, perfect example of what a bounce looks like and what you can do with a bounce. So yeah, basically just well skating. And you don't actually have to Icarus dash here. I mean, you can, and it kind of changes your character model, so maybe you kind of have to. But it's just to prevent physics damage, right? It also changes the animations like a little bit, like I said. But yeah, you can also bounce by just hurling yourself into a slanted wall. That also works too. Okay, let's talk about different sword choices. So some people have asked questions about when do people use different Icarus swords, etc., etc. It's fairly simple, right? These days, people are either using Slammer or they're using, the lightweight sword from the dungeon, right? Sullen Claw. So when you use Slammer versus Sullen Claw has a faster light attack. It has a faster ground line as a result. And the heavy attack is kind of slow. It's about as fast as the light attack line, to be honest, like a ground line. And then Slammer obviously just has the fastest heavy attack in the game. So you would use Slammer whenever you're doing like long skating routes that require you to use the heavy attack. And then you would use Sullen Claw maybe like during encounter where you're just light attacking around a lot. And so an example of something of the former category is First Contact, right? So First Contact, you can see clearly in this clip here, the difference in speed between these two swords. So you can see here, he's just kind of skating around. This is on the old sword, right? So this is on the other half technically, but Slammer left clicks would obviously look the same here. So yeah, that's just a little taste of what the left clicks would look like on Slammer. And then here you have a Sullen Claw. So this is a more modern run. And you can see here that the momentum is like, it's noticeable, right? It's noticeable. Yeah, he like hurls himself into the wall there. But you can see that, yeah, the momentum difference is definitely noticeable, even without the Mountaintop boost there. Okay, next we have ground skating or ground lining. This is an example from like DSC 2.3, where there is there is a ledge here, I guess, so technically you could like back up and heavy attack maybe. But yeah, ground lining is simply just left click lining off of the ground, off of flat ground. The way you do this is basically doing light attack line inputs, which I guess I haven't even shown you what a light attack line is, but it's basically doing regular shadow skating or wall skating, but with a left click instead of a right click. And you just do this with a jump input right before, and all your inputs are really fast, right? So you do jump, and then you do, if you're on mouse keyboard, left click space F, or your super button, if you're on Warlock. So yeah, that's what ground lining is. Ground lining is pretty cool. I mean, you can chain ground lines back to back, and you can do it literally anywhere, right? That's why it's called a ground line. You can do it on flat ground. And then, it just goes back into doing normal heavy attack skates. Okay, next we have the light attack skate. I really wish I didn't do this alphabetically. I probably should have organized these, in a logical order, but whatever. Light attack skate, I think is a little bit underutilized. I think a lot of people just kind of only heavy attack skate. There are places where light attack skating makes it easier for you to like handle your character model, or like you literally just don't need to go a certain amount of distance, or you don't need a certain amount of height, or you don't want to hurl yourself too fast. So yeah, that's what a light attack skate is for. This is the light attack skate. Boom, right? It just makes it so that when he swaps his swords, he doesn't end up over here. He ends up over here. This is a perfect example of why you would want a light attack skate. Also, the thing I was mentioning earlier, how like using a sword attack near like a slanted surface will force you over it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You know what? I didn't bring an example clip exactly for this, but I should talk about this. There's certain terrain in D2 where you'll learn over time by doing this and trying this over time. But there's certain terrain in D2. This is a more steep example, but you can literally just force yourself with a right click animation over a lot of stuff in D2 and do well skate or shadow skate inputs toward the end of a ledge. So like if you are in front of like a bunch of rocks that are like this, and then there's like a ledge here, you can like start your right click down here. Your character will be forced to travel here, do your jump and dive or jump and well inputs like right here, and then you'll do a successful skate. So this is exactly what's going on here, right? He's like forcing himself over. Okay, next we have nade skating. This is like the most niche thing I think on this entire list. Basically, if you are holding a relic, or in this case motes, and you still have access to your nade, which a lot of relics do still give you access to your nade if you are holding them, you can use your nade to cancel the end of the animation of swinging with that relic. So normally D2, everything that's modeled after a sword. So there's a bunch of relics that are modeled after swords. I'm sure like the motes are internally secretly a sword. And then you have your actual swords, right? The end of your sword swing animation has a hard cutoff, right? It like stops your momentum when you reach the end of the animation. So that's why skating and fake skating, for example, is like important, because you can skate and you can like carry your light attack momentum or whatever sword momentum you have without actually reaching the end of the animation. It's like an animation cancel, right? So with motes, you can do this too, or with relics, you can do this too, where by throwing your nade or trying to charge your nade, so you can do this on Void Warlock, for example, anywhere you can charge your nade. You can charge your nade and then sprint to instantly cancel charging your nade, and it will end the animation of, for example, the mote light attack here, but it will not cancel the momentum. So you'll see here, get stuck on the ground, and then bang. Instantly, you'll see that nade flash because he instantly canceled it by sprinting, and that allows him to carry his momentum a little bit here. Now, the reason why I say this is really niche is because even in Prophecy, if you're playing correctly and you have good energy, to my understanding, you're usually not going to need to cross the room as much. Nade skating in other categories that are not Prophecy, not very common, right? So it is like a thing that exists, but it's not a huge, difference maker, and it's just like a small thing that I thought I'd note. No eager skate. Yeah, you can obviously skate without eager. In this particular example, for example, this player has recently just landed from a skate and they don't have eager, or it would be a waste of time to try and waste their eager here because they want to reuse it as they enter this bottom section. So instead, what they do, instead of like kind of just light attacking and jumping, which would be slow here, they do a right click skate, but with no eager. And you can do this, and it does give you like a little bit of momentum, right? Oh yeah, okay. So the obvious reason why they didn't use their eager there is because they wanted to immediately chain it into an actual eager skate right after that, right? So I don't see this tech get used that much, the no eager skate, where you just kind of like right click skate without eager edge. But it's useful in some cases, and this is like a perfect example where you have a small gap you want to cross and then a big gap where you want to save your eager for that one, right? Next, we have Relic Groundlining. This is also quite niche because, obviously, there are not a lot of categories that have relics, and a lot of the categories that do have relics, you don't necessarily want to be Relic Groundlining them. But yeah, Relic Groundlining is basically just groundlining, except you pick up a relic at a certain moment during your groundline animation, and that allows you to actually carry the momentum into holding the relic. So this is the last chance mission where there are these kind of pit hive sword relics, and you can simply just, groundline as you are picking up the relic, and that allows you to carry the momentum that you have with that relic. Okay, next we have relic skating. Relic skating is essentially just fake skating. I just realized I don't have a fake skating clip here. Fake skating is essentially just like, it's not as relevant these days. I guess you should still fake skate if you have eager, but it's simply the act of swinging with your sword and then double swapping weapons in the middle of your swing animation while tapping your burst cloud. You can do it on Hunter too, I guess. But it's just like swapping off your sword after swinging it before it comes to the end of that animation. And fake skating, I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like in this clip. So I guess relic skating kind of works for it. The only difference here is normally when you fake skate, people use maybe like their switch weapon bind, or they use like 1, 2, 3, or they use scroll wheel if you're like a degenerate like me. But you can also fake skate using next previous weapon binds, and people don't tend to favor those. So by default, people are going to be like, wait, what? Like you're not supposed to fake skate with those. But with pit relics, for example, you have to use next previous binds to not drop the relic. So you'll see here in a second, right? He's just kind of swinging and fake skating as if it was a normal sword, but that's because he's using next previous weapon binds. So this is exactly what fake skating looks like on a normal sword. That's pretty much it. Okay, next we have strand skating. Strand skating is basically like shatter skating, except I believe there's only certain surfaces you can do it off of. So like downhill inclines like this one in VOG, pretty much perfect. Not really used as much anymore because of the diversity of stuff we have with like Mountaintop, and you don't really need to be on Strand Hunter. I guess maybe like for like Alethonym grappling or whatever, but not really. The last time I saw strand skating was in an actual run was a long time ago. But regardless, you might want to know about it. So it's basically just using ensnaring slam and not pressing any directional inputs and delaying your inputs slightly compared to normal skating. I wouldn't say this is super important to learn, honestly. I haven't really practiced this tech at all, but it used to be used for VOG entrance. So there you go. Similar momentum to just like a regular shatter skate. And then, bang. Obviously, you saw the Alethonym grapple though, and that's what's used these days, and that's much faster. Okay, next we have a super line. Okay, super lining is basically certain supers in this game. I want to give Needlestorm as like probably the best example. Carry momentum into the super animation, like whatever momentum you had like before. So some supers also do this, like Blade Barrage carries momentum a little worse. Thunder Crash also carries momentum, but also a little bit worse. Needlestorm is the best one. Like it carries it pretty much 100%, right? Like you slow down a little bit, but pretty much 100%. So you used to be able to transfer eager to melees like Lightning Surge. And so that's what I'm doing in this clip. That got patched, but I'm just using this as an example of transferring momentum into Needlestorm. So you can do this with like I'm sure you've seen people in PvP, using Eager Edge Sword, right click Needlestorm, bang, they go send flying. So you'll see here, boom, I lightning surge, and my needle storm takes me super far, right? So yeah, that's needle storm skating or whatever you want to call it. But people used to just call it, it's just like a super skate, super line, whatever you want to call it. A bunch of other supers do this too. Like Dawnblade kind of used to do this in some cases. So yeah, not super common because you generally don't want to be on needle storm during speedrunning for some, unless you're maybe for damage. And then I mean, if you care about damage, it's probably Hunter anyway. But regardless, you're generally not on needle storm. There are some things that supers are used for, like needle storm are used for, but we're gonna get to that later. And it's not for this specific purpose, not for launching yourself. Okay, next we have sword swapping / Hyperblade. Okay, so Hyperblade is interesting, right? Hyperblade is a catalyst on the lightsaber, the Praxic blade, and the way it works is when you take incoming damage, you get amplified, and your next one swing gets like Eager Edge basically. So I want you to take a look here at what K3 does. So first he sword swaps. Eager Edge has an internal cooldown. However, it's per sword. So if you swap from one sword to another sword with Eager Edge, you instantly get Eager Edge back, right? So you'll see here, he has Eager Edge, and he is still on cooldown on one sword. So he swaps the other sword and then instantly skates, right? So that's a sword swap. Not something you're gonna see in most like fire team runs because it's just like kind of unnecessary, and you eat a lot of ammo by doing it, right? You have your heavy ammo. But you might see it in some skip runs, like this is a skip run. This is the DSC-01 world record run. So you might see it in those runs, but outside of that, not very feasible. And then he uses Hyperblade here, which is interesting. So he's blocking and he takes physics damage, which counts for Hyperblade, by the way. And the interesting thing with Hyperblade is that groundlining doesn't consume Hyperblade because you don't actually swing your sword. You cancel the animation of swinging your sword. So you'll see here, he groundlines, or maybe that's like a left click line off some terrain there. And then he keeps it. And then, yeah, I mean, he could have swung again, I guess. Actually, did it remove its Hyperblade? I don't think it did. Because I know you can kind of just chain. Oh, no, it did remove its Hyperblade. Okay, I don't know. Regardless, though, you can kind of repeatedly take damage and continuously chain ground lines using Hyperblade, which is pretty cool. So yeah, he's just going to use his Eager, and then he's going to continue his little route here. So yeah, sword swap, Hyperblade. Hyperblade is it's useful in some cases, right? I think it's a little bit underutilized, and I think spamming ground lines with Hyperblade is potentially useful for a route in some mission somewhere. But yeah, kind of niche, and because lightsabers have like a kind of a weird animation, some people prefer Ergo for just general movement. Especially because Gizmo, the only bipod micro missile, is in the kinetic slot, so that's obviously also a factor as well. Okay, and then finally, our last skating tech, which is not super common. You probably won't see this in like a raid or dungeon speedrun, because it's not the most consistent, I would say. I mean, maybe with practice, that's a bit more consistent. But also, like, you would maybe just groundline over doing this. But it's called a water skate. And the way that it works is you just jump and you left click and instantly right click. And your jump and left click have to be very, very, very close together so that you get something called a ground eager. So ground eager is not just swinging on the ground, but it's basically if you jump and your feet are close enough to the ground, you can swing with additional momentum. And for whatever reason, you can right click midair and it won't instantly stop your momentum. So this is what a water skate looks like. It's called a water skate because it's easier to do it on water surfaces because for whatever reason, the tolerance threshold for where your feet can be is like higher because the game thinks that the water is still like. So basically, okay, in D2, when you're standing in water, obviously it like goes up to your ankles or it goes up to your whatever, like it goes up to your legs, right? And when you jump and you do this like jumping left click, right click thing, it just makes the timing window bigger because for some reason the water counts as like an additional surface. And so you have more tolerance for doing this. Like you can jump higher and be, worse with your timing. But here it's on flat ground, right? So this just proves that it can be done on flat ground. Timing's just a bit tighter. So you just do jump left, right really quickly and then boom, right? So pretty fast, but not super relevant because most people just groundline. I guess in this particular case, groundlining would maybe take you a bit higher, so it might be worse in that regard. But just some niche tech, not really used in many runs. Okay, so that's it for skating. Let's go ahead and talk about Sparrow tech. So Sparrow tech, there's like three main things that are used. We're going to start with Sparrow flying. Sparrow flying is not very useful anymore because if you want vertical momentum in D2, I'm sure if you've watched like Sunset Raid speedruns, like the ones that we broke down a little while ago, you probably saw Sparrow flying in a couple of them. Sparrow flying is not really useful anymore because you have Mountaintop. You just have Mountaintop now. So there is literally zero reason to use a Sparrow for vertical momentum these days. You can if you want to. And in this case, I am not on flat ground, so I'm Sparrow flying. And but you don't even need to Sparrow Fly here. There's like ways of skating this route as well. So it's not super relevant, but it's basically, if you're not familiar, just like spinning your Sparrow and doing like barrel rolls and just using your dodges to dodge upward, either straight up or like diagonally upward, like I'm doing here. Okay, and then we have 2 more Sparrow attacks, or I guess technically 3 more, but I have 2 clips. The first one is called Slipstreaming. Slipstreaming is one of probably the only way. I mean, I guess there's like sword flying and stuff, but Slipstreaming is like the fastest way to get a very, very, very long amount of horizontal travel. So you'll see here, we're going to watch this whole clip. This is maybe the most famous Slipstream skip in D2 right now. Besides maybe like the SC entrance, which isn't even done Slipstream, it's like a Slipskate, which is a little bit different. But yeah, this is a Slipstream. It's basically just spinning your Sparrow in like a slanted motion, I want to call it, and like a V motion. And you're using your dodge basically whenever you get to this portion. So you see this wing here is pointing forward and up. You're just dodging at that moment. And he's on low FPS here because he wants to conserve as much height as he can because he's going to be traveling a very, very, very long distance out of bounds. So yeah, he's going very, 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 very far. And so you imagine if he tried to like shatter skate this, even like if with blade focus transferring or whatever, he would not be able to make it this far, right? So this is for very, very, very long distance stuff, generally speaking, when you have access to a Sparrow, of course. Okay, so that's slipstreaming. And then we have slip skating plus semi-rotation skating. So this is the same clip that we saw before, but like a little bit fast forwarded. So slip skating is essentially dismounting your Sparrow in the middle of a slipstream at a certain moment where your character would land on the back of your Sparrow. And the back of your Sparrow actually counts as land for a skate. And when you skate off of your Sparrow as it hits you in the butt, both of those velocities get added to each other. So you'll watch here, he's going to dismount and then boom, he's going to skate. And the Sparrow actually adds its momentum to him on top of his skate. So you see here, his shatter skate is faster than normal. And then he blink swaps. And we're going to talk about blink swapping in a later section. But blink swapping, as you can see, is basically just swapping to prismatic or arc and then blinking off of a skate so that you get more, you get more airtime, right? And then he's going to do something called a semi-rotation. So he's going to land here. And unfortunately, he doesn't have eager for a bit, so he's waiting. And then boom, he does a bounce. Again, application of another tech we talked about before, bouncing. And he's going to summon his Sparrow midair. He's going to dodge twice. And the key to doing this, if you're curious about doing it yourself, is you basically want to spin your Sparrow at a slow medium speed. You want to rotate your Sparrow midair at a slow medium speed counterclockwise, and then you're going to dodge once when you're like 45 degree like this, and then you're going to dodge a second time when your Sparrow is kind of like that. That's how I do it anyway. So he's dodging twice here, and then he is on the back of his Sparrow, and then he's skating off the back of his Sparrow. Okay. This might look really crazy. Oh, another use of Hyperblade here, by the way, pretty cool. The reason why he uses Hyperblade here is because he can left click through this gap and then instantly eager afterward to force him even faster through both gaps, right? So pretty cool stuff. But yeah, semi-rotation skating looks like it's really hard. But if you actually get the timing of those two dodges, like you basically automatically land on the back of your Sparrow and then you have like a full second to skate. So it's pretty chill. Okay, so that's it for Sparrow tech. And then finally, or useful Sparrow tech, I'll say for speedrunning at least, because there's a lot more, but it's more for like show and not necessarily for like speedrunning. Okay, and then finally, we have the miscellaneous section. Okay, so the miscellaneous section, should we sort this alphabetically? Yeah, we probably should. So let me group by none, sort alphabetically here. Okay, the first thing is barrier surfing. So barrier surfing, there's a lot of barriers in D2. There's different types, right? There's pushback barriers, there's insta-kill barriers. We're going to talk about pushback barriers. Pushback barriers are basically just imagine in D2, right? Let's say you have an encounter and this is the platform. You might have pushback barriers all around the sides that push you inward toward the encounter. And try as you might, you can't get out of the pushback barriers. Generally speaking, there are ways of getting past them, but as a normal player, you're not going to be able to get past them. However, what you can do in D2 is you can actually enter them temporarily and they amplify your speed as you pass kind of through them. Okay. So if you pass through a pushback barrier at a diagonal angle, it will push you outward and it will increase your velocity. As you get sent outward. Okay, so that's called barrier surfing. And this is probably the most prominent example of barrier surfing in an actual run category. So you'll see here, Troy, there's a pushback barrier on top of him right now that's pushing down. Okay, so he's going to swing forward into it. And you'll see here that little moment there. I want to go back a little bit here. That little moment right there where his character gets pushed down. You see that, right? Right there. It pushed him down just there. he's going to sword forward and it's going to push him into the pushback barrier and it's going to send him down and forward. And you'll notice that the amount of speed that he gets here, this is not normally, right? This is not normally. I mean, the barrier surf isn't super, super noticeable, granted. Sometimes it's a bit more noticeable than this, but that's definitely more than you would normally get off of a light attack, just, in the air. So yeah, that's a barrier surf. Okay. Next, we have blink swapping. This is maybe like one of the most famous blink swaps in SE01, of course. Swapping to arc, looking straight up, so you get increased, blink height. And yeah, that's blink swapping. It's literally just swapping after you skate to keep more airtime, right? Next, we have crouch jumping. This is in order to get through small gaps that you normally wouldn't be able to get to that are elevated. So literally perfect for the Spire event here. This is basically just jumping and crouching, I think, like at the same time, pretty much. Or is it like, yeah, it's like jumping and then crouching like right after or something like that. And that allows your character to like compress its hitbox midair and for you to like get over small ledges like this. There's other ways of doing this using like Icarus Dash and Shiver Strike, which you might have seen, but we're going to cover those in another clip. Okay, so that's crouch jumping. Next, we have crystal launching. Crystal launching, another miscellaneous tech here. It can either be used to give you vertical height or horizontal momentum. So you'll see in Throne 02, this is Throne Skip, you can throw a crystal down right here, and even though you don't have jumps, it resets your kind of character's position and displaces you upward and sends you across this gap here, which you wouldn't be able to make if you didn't have access to that. Another thing you can do is, this used to be used in Wish Entrance, is you can jump up onto a wall and at a certain moment throw a Touch of Winter Duskfield like into the wall like this, and it will send you upward, and because you were briefly standing on a crystal, it will reset your jumps as well. So that's another kind of use case for crystal launching, which isn't used that much anymore, but used to be a thing. Next, we have frame capping. Frame capping is it's not really a tech, but it's like something you should know about. Having lower frames in Destiny means you get affected less by, I want to say, velocity, which includes gravity. So, in Gunner's clip here, this is, he's slipstreaming here. The reason why he's on 30 FPS is because his Sparrow will literally lose less height as he slips because he's on lower frames. And towards the end of his slip here, and the only way to really like explain this is you kind of have to just try this yourself. Also, being on lower frames affects your speed when it comes to like well skating and stuff as well. So, if someone's on like a shitty PC and you like well skate right next to them, there were moments in King's Fall, for example, where like we would literally pass excluded because he had lower frames than us on the same skate, which is kind of funny. But tangent aside, if you go try slipstreaming on lower FPS versus higher FPS, like the difference is immediately noticeable. Like anybody that tries to learn slipstreaming will generally be told to start on low FPS because it's easier. Okay, so yeah, slipstreaming, low FPS, and then he gets to the end here, drives to the final airlock, and then you'll see that he changes his frames back off of 30. So pretty common thing for speedrunners to do. There's some other stuff in this game where you can't do it without being on 30 FPS. Storm's Edge breaching is a good example, which we'll show you later. But I just wanted to show you that frame capping is like a thing that D2 players do a fair amount in speedrunning. Okay, next we have Heat Rises climbing. Heat Rises climbing is simply the fact that you can climb infinitely on an incline on using Heat Rises, which is not used like that much anymore, but this is like an old run that used to use it. This is an old Vow run that used to use it. This is Vow 1-3. And, he's just climbing up this really big incline here using Heat Rises. You can infinitely do it. And yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to show you. Not used super common anymore because, people would just grapple this, or, people don't do this route anymore. But these days, if people needed to gain a lot of height, they would either, bounce or grapple it or Mountaintop it or whatever. Okay, next we have Heat Glide Extension. This is simply popping Heat Rises mid-glide like this in order to extend how long you can glide for. Not really a tech, I guess. Maybe it's tech, I don't know. But it just lets you kind of keep your well skate for longer. I mean, kind of obvious, but I don't know. I thought I should include it because it is pretty common whenever you need to skate very long distances. So I guess King's Fall is like one of the only places where you really need to skate this long of a distance, but just something people do, right? Next we have sword launching. This one is pretty important. There's a lot of categories in D2 where you have to hit someone else with a sword because you want to send them flying. In this case, the person with the heart in Queen's Walk. So here, bang, that was a good hit. And then there's also one more hit that is out of bounds. And this one is the important one. There you go, bang. Like you're going golfing, sending your teammate into the hole out of bounds. Yeah. So, yeah, that's sword launching. Pretty important. There's a lot of categories. There's some tips for sword launching to make it consistent, pretty much 100% consistent. But and having higher frames helps. But I'm not going to get into that in this video because it's going to be way too much to talk about if I go into every tech, with that amount of detail. But the basics is you're just hitting someone with a sword. There's different ways to hit people with a sword. Like you can use like a lightweight sword. You could do a jumping left click. You can do a grounded left click. And all the different velocities that different sword animations have will determine how quickly the person you're hitting gets launched, right? So that's also something to note. You might use different swords for different hits. Okay. Next we have Midair Nade. This is very uncommon, but it's useful in some places. And this is basically throwing a cold snap in the air at the back of your Sparrow. So look at this, and then shooting the projectile in the air to create terrain out of nothing. Okay, you might imagine why this is not a very common tech, because not a lot of tech you could throw a cold snap at a teammate and do this too. But there's very few places where you need to make terrain in the air out of nothing. And also not that many places where you're by yourself and have a Sparrow and also need to do that. But this player is needing to set their spawn point in the air. And so that, that's why they're doing this. And then finally, the last movement tech I want to talk about is Strafe Heat Rises. So yeah, right here, they just pop Heat Rises. Actually, I kind of cut off some of that. Let me play it again. So yeah, they load in, they pop Heat Rises, and they're on Strafe Glide right now. And so because they don't have access to a sword, being on Strafe Glide here and just kind of bouncing around and hitting terrain allows them to accelerate very quickly and just maintain very smooth movement throughout the environment. Okay, so Strafe Heat Rises used to be like a big thing with Rain of Fire Galley and like Lost Sector speedruns. In normal categories, it's not really used at all, but just something to note: Strafe and Heat Rises interaction. Because unlike with Burst Glide, when you have Heat Rises active, it like kind of decelerates you. With Strafe Glide and Heat Rises, it actually accelerates you when you're like using Icarus Dash and like bouncing and stuff. So yeah, that's it for movement tech. Let's go ahead and I guess we'll go to the next slide, even though we've not really been looking at the slides for quite some time. We're going to talk about mechanics next. Okay, so mechanics, this is like the broadest, like weirdest category because there's a lot of stuff that could technically be considered like mechanics. But let's talk about the what should we talk about? Let's talk about miscellaneous stuff first, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about is an auto-res, okay? So there are, as I'm sure you've seen in D2, auto-res triggers in activities like raids and dungeons. And these are often, like the most common auto-res one is when a boss dies and an encounter ends, or just like any encounter ends, right? So this is Solo Spire. And in Solo Spire, this player is hitting 3 of the 4, arc nodes here in order to finish the encounter, but they're leaving the 4th one for some reason. And the reason for that is because they are shooting the 4th one at a specific moment because they want to time the auto-res for a strategy that they're using. And the strategy that they're using is there's a death barrier below them right now. And so they can't make it out of bounds to the transition that they want to get to. So instead what they decide to do is they die at a certain moment. And if they shatter dive down, the way deaths work in D2 is your death point gets set a certain number of meters below where you died if you die midair. Okay, so there's a certain number of meters that will set your death below that. And auto-reses can auto-res you even if you set your death point somewhere that's like through a death barrier or something like that. And we're going to talk about, auto-reses and how important they are later. But think about an auto-res like this. Auto-reses will always, compared to like if a player were to manually res you or if you were to res yourself, auto-reses behave differently. They try to res you exactly where your ghost is, like exactly where your ghost is, even if your ghost is not necessarily where you died. Okay, so when you die like this in a death barrier, it puts your ghost like straight down. It's like sets your ghost like straight down, even if it's below the barrier. And him getting auto rest here, he's actually below the barrier now. So that's why he timed the end of the encounter so that he could die and then get auto res below the death barrier. Right? Does that make sense? And then he kind of like continues his route here and goes down. Okay, so that's what an auto res is, or you know what an auto res is, but that's how it's used. Okay. Next we have dying while joining. So this is super niche. Like this is like the one time I've seen this, honestly. But this is like a small interaction for like micro optimizing stuff. If you die and then while you're getting joining allies and you join while you're dead, it actually normally when you get joining allies you spawn with your kinetic weapon out, right? But if you do this, you spawn with whatever weapon you had out when you died. So he died with his sword out, and you'll see here after joining allies, he spawns in with his sword out. And the reason for that is because when you get joining allies, your character is technically in the encounter, even if your screen is black for quite some time. And so when it teleported him in, his eager got wasted because it ran out of its duration and now he doesn't have eager. And so the reason for that is because he wants to be able to pull out his sword. And okay, well, I guess I cut off the clip early, but he wants to swing forward with no eager and then swing forward again with eager in order to get to the boss faster, instead of, having to swap to his sword, not be able to use his sword because it has eager stowed. It's like a weapon that is primed. I don't know. The eager edge cooldown and like how you stow it and keep it is very important in speedrunning. So the fact that he knows he is not going to have eager when he pulls out his sword because he already has it out is important here. So yeah, that's like a small thing, death while joining. Ghost skip. This is like a classic one. This one's been in the game for years and years and years. This is literally just whenever you hack or interact or scan something, you can instantly press tab again or whatever your ghost button is in order to instantly stow the ghost and put it away and cancel the animation, but still actually have your ghost scan the thing. Okay. Next we have sword plus temp. So flags in Destiny can be sorted, as I'm sure you've probably seen in your LFG. Somebody has done it at some point. Also, a cool thing with flags in Destiny is that I do this a lot, but if you slide while you're placing a flag, you can do other animations into it. So I don't have a clip of this, but you can slide into a flag place and then sword while your character is placing the flag midair. You can slide into a flag place and place your well while you're placing a flag. You can cast Goldie while you're placing a flag. You can ascension while you're placing a flag. There's a bunch of stuff you can do, but basically you just like slide and jump while you're placing a flag, and it like lets you do that. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, anyways, so here you can just like sword a flag by simply swapping to your sword, holding interact, and then as your interact reaches the end, you just swipe. Pretty straightforward. And then also another thing is there's perma flags in Destiny where you can place a flag at a certain moment when an encounter is starting, and if the encounter doesn't try to erase the flag after you've placed it, the flag will just stay there for the entire encounter. You can only use it once, but it will stay there for the entire encounter. In modern raid encounters, Bungie has coded in like later like checks for flags being placed, and they will just try to erase the flag like very late. So there's no way to place a perma because literally the flag circle has disappeared by the time that the flag check goes off. So in this particular instance, you'll see here that the flag check is not for quite some time. So my teammates can they death warp in, and we'll talk about what death warping is in a second, but they death warp in and they can rally to this flag, and then the flag will disappear eventually. Like in a couple seconds, it'll disappear, right? So that's what a temp flag is. We call it a temp perma, which is an oxymoron, but temp perma, temp flag, whatever. And that's basically like just allows your teammates to pick up the flag for a couple seconds after the encounter has already started. But also it allows you to start encounters as quickly as possible. And the reason for that is because a lot of the time, the fastest way to start an encounter is to just start the encounter and place the flag afterward, right? Because if you place the flag and you wait for Irma to rally and then you start the encounter, it's like a little bit slower. So sometimes a temp is the fastest way to ensure everybody gets ammo, but also start the encounter instantly. Does that make sense? So yeah, that's also what a temp is for. In this particular instance, it's just enabling our teammates to warp in, because obviously getting warped into the encounter and pressing E and like spawning in is if you just place a normal flag, it would just disappear instantly and they wouldn't be able to rally. So that's why we temp here. Okay, next up we have a perma. Now this is an actual perma. Bungie patched out perma flags in a lot of encounters, a lot of raids, and so there's very few of them left that actually still work. But this one still works. This one is in Prophecy, the Phalanx Echo encounter. And you'll see here that this player is going to wait for a certain cue for the boss. They've memorized a certain timing, and when they see that timing go off, they hold interact, and this flag is going to stay permanently. It's called a perma flag. Like I mentioned, newer raids and some older raids as well now, because Bungie went back and patched them, like Bog and Kingsfall and Garden all used to have permas. They all got patched out. Yeah, those raids, if you try to perma, the flag will stay for a little bit and then it will disappear later. Okay, so yeah, permas are gone in all new activities. Bungie makes sure that they're not able to be placed. But yeah. Okay, next up we have the joining cancel. Joining cancel is simply resetting your joining allies timer. So joining allies, the way it works is obviously whenever an encounter starts, actually, maybe you don't know this, so it's not as obvious, but when an encounter starts, there are a bunch of areas around the map that become joining regions. So when you exit these regions, your joining allies timer disappears, and when you re-enter them, your joining allies timer restarts at 5. Okay? Now, the thing about joining allies is that in a lot of encounters, not all encounters, there is a limited joining allies timer. Okay? So the joining allies timer in most encounters is like maybe 11 seconds, 12 seconds, 13 seconds, whatever. It's around there. Okay? And that means that if you were to somehow be able to reset your joining allies timer, then you can stay out of bounds and your joining allies timer won't fully complete and the joining region will disappear by the time you want to leave. Okay, so that's what resetting joining allies is for. Now, there's some encounters that have infinite joining, so you can't leave them no matter what, right? So you're going to get joined no matter what back to the encounter. But Atrax is not one of them. Atrax has short joining. And so what does this mean? Notice how the player in this clip, they have joining allies and it ticks down to 4, right? So the encounter has started, Atrax has just started, objective update, bang, joining allies 5, 4, and you'll see they move forward and it says clarity control. I want you to notice this. It says clarity control and their joining allies timer resets. This is called joining canceling. And the way that it works is very simple. Obviously encounters are in load zones in Destiny, and a joining allies always comes from an encounter load zone, right? There's a region of the map that's trying to pull you back to that region. So in this particular instance, you have 2 load zones. You have restricted and you have clarity control. This is where Atrax happens, right? This is Atrax. That R got eaten there. And then you have security, right? So what this player is actually doing is they're sitting at the boundary between restricted and clarity control, and they're dipping into clarity control to reset their joining allies timer. Because there's 2 ways of resetting your joining allies timer. Number 1 is you actually go back into the regular encounter bounds and your joining allies timer will just disappear, right? The other way is by dipping into the load zone that is trying to join you from an adjacent load zone. So here, Sparrow isn't restricted. He's waiting on the boundary between security and clarity control, or restricted and clarity control. And then when he knows his joining allies timer is at a certain moment, he's going to dip in, and that's going to set it back up to 5. It's not going to make the timer disappear, but it's going to make it set up back to 5. And he knows that this is the perfect amount of time that the joining allies timer, right, joining region is going to disappear at a certain moment. It's going to go to 0 and then it's going to disappear because the joining, like I said, Atrax has short joining. So if, for example, you were able to start your joining allies timer at like 8, it would never join you. Does that make sense? So yeah, that is what joining canceling is. It's used in some skips, like it used to be used in VOG. It's still used in DSC, but it's not used in all skips, right? Because some encounters have infinite joining, like I said. Okay, next we have shoot to loot. I don't know, this isn't really tech, I guess, but like, I don't know, speedrunning, people use shoot to loot a lot with like rocket sidearms and stuff, especially like Lotus Eater. I just thought I'd show you because it's like useful, right? Being able to not have to go walk over ammo is like pretty helpful. And a lot of the time you don't necessarily, it's also a reload, by the way, which is very, very useful actually. That is maybe an underrated feature of shoot to loot, because I know people used to make like shoot to loot rocket rotations back when people first like found out about this or were talking about it. But the fact that I can like reload my galley, especially for example, by just shoot to looting a special or heavy brick is really nice, because I don't have to, manually reload it, and I can keep high uptime on my weapons and shoot. So yeah, that's shoot to loot. And finally we have for miscellaneous, I guess, we have Autosplitting. Autosplitting is not like tech really, but it's like something you should know about, I guess, if you're speedrunning. And basically it's using a 2016 Toyota Corolla's Autosplitter, which I have a tutorial for on my channel. And if you set it up, you can look for certain white pixels, like his hatred halts, for example, and your live split timer will automatically split when it sees these cues at machine precision, right? Unlike human precision, it's machine precision. And so even if it's like a little delayed, it'll be the same delay every time. And you can use this to identify certain timings for certain time-sensitive objectives in a raid or dungeon or whatever activity you're speedrunning. So in this particular instance, Ron has this thing where if you kill all like the scions and stuff after his hatred halts, right? You can kill all the ads before the next set, and you can instantly start the next set by killing all of these ads like quickly, basically, right? Like the ad clear matters if you kill the scions after his hatred halts. And so the thing is, if you kill them too early, the encounter will soft lock, right? It will start the next set, but the no nodes will spawn. Like the buff won't spawn, the nodes won't spawn. And so we were experimenting with this, and of course you can use the spawn animation, and some of my teammates were using like the spawn animation and like, using a human method of figuring out, which is like, oh, if it spawns at this time, I can just shoot this ad, wait a little bit and shoot this ad, and it'll work, right? But I was using an auto splitter. And so I knew that when this auto splitter hits 6 plus human reaction time, if I shoot the last ad, it won't soft lock and it'll be like on time. Okay. So I'm looking. I call shoot, bang, right? Obviously it was a little slow there compared to like normal, but this is pretty lenient. And you'll see here that I don't lose any time. It's like, still the same as the last split. But yeah, that was just one way, for example, of using an auto splitter to find like a timing window where you might want to avoid soft locking something, or you want to make something as quick as possible, or you want to see exactly how much time a certain segment contains. Autosplitting is very useful for that. Okay, so yeah, that's autosplitting. And now we're going to talk about a couple of categories of mechanics that I've actually categorized into folders. So the first one is ammo generation. This one's obvious, right? Like in speedrunning, yeah, if you just came from swords and you didn't get a flag and you want like rockets for damage, boom, mark a guy, the guy gets finished, make 2 heavy bricks. I put on a shoot to loot weapon so I can, pick up some of the ammo that my teammates are making. Pretty obvious, right? The other thing I guess is a bit underutilized is icebreaker, right? Let's say you had a primary in your energy slot, or you are running out of ammo in your energy slot and you need it for mechanics. You can just kill some ads. You can just kill some ads with your other weapons. And icebreaker gets a lot of ammo every time you do this, right? And it's a total of 10, and it converts 1-to-1 with other special ammo. So that's 1/5 special ammo right there that I just got from 1 kill. Another kill, and bang, another 20% of my special ammo just arrived in my energy slot. And then you can see here, I'm swiping through here, and then I swap. And now I have ammo to work with for whatever I need to do. Okay, so that's ammo. Next, let's talk about super generation. Yeah, there's actually quite a few. I mean, super generating is pretty important in speedrunning. There's a lot of times where you don't get a flag and you need to make a super for damage or for transition or whatever. So there's actually quite a few ways, and I think a lot of these people are not aware of. Well, the first one people are, but some of the other ones no. Okay, so first we have bad juju. I mean, this is just a consistent way of getting your super if you need it. There are other efficient methods as well, like combination blow farming or whatever. But bad juju is a pretty consistent way of doing it on any subclass. So yeah, bad juju. Shout out bad juju. The next one, people are definitely not as familiar with this, and I think this might get abused in like day ones and stuff if people know more about this. It's called benevolent finisher spamming. Okay, and the way it works is there is a finisher orb mod right on your class item that makes orbs whenever you finish her. And you need 3 armor charge for it. However, you can get armor charge off of orbs made by other people. And when a bunch of people finisher one ad, it counts for everybody, right? It's like special finisher. If a bunch of people special finisher a single ad, it makes a bunch of special bricks, right? And so if you see what I'm getting at here, you can have a bunch of people finisher the same ad over and over. So you just make a bunch of finishers. I was doing a poor example here, but this is just an example. You can see in the bottom left here, a bunch of people are just making orbs, right? Bang, everybody's just printing orbs. And if you have star eaters on top of this, it's like 3.5 finishers for everybody to get their entire super in a fire teamer. So you can see here instantly, everybody just has their well. I didn't even participate in most of these finishers. We set up a better system for this after this clip was made. But yeah, I mean, it's literally like 3 or 4 finishers. Everybody just has their full super from nothing. Okay, so yeah, pretty cool. You can use powerful friends and stacks on stacks and stuff like that to keep this chain going. But yeah, pretty OP. You can super chain pretty quickly by using Benevolent Finisher. This is used in a couple categories right now. It was used in this category just for quality of life. But for example, in Last Wish, it's used after Kali is killed. There's a couple thralls left on the plate, and we spam finishers on every single one of them, and it gives us all full supers going into Shuro, which are needed because our strats require us to have supers for Shuro-Chi. So yeah, pretty important stuff there. Next, we have Dealer's Choice. There's an origin trait called Dealer's Choice, which the more weapons you have on that are part of this Dealer's Choice set, including Stillhunt and Kvostov, they count, it gives you more super generation. So K3 here, he has the Call on, which has Dealer's Choice, No Hesitation on, which also has Dealer's Choice, and then Galley, which doesn't count, but it's 2 out of 3. And you'll see here just how quickly he gets his super back, right? So he's shooting ads. I believe he also has Radiant Dance Machines on, which allows him to get his dodge back from primary kills in this instance. And yeah, I mean, you can see here he's just absolutely farming his super insanely quickly. And he already almost has his super. Bang. There you go. Boom. He basically has a super. Okay. Next, we have Echo of Reprisal combined with Bad Juju. This was like, we used this at some point to farm a tether very quickly. Yeah, obviously combined with like Dynamo distribution and Bad Juju and stuff, but Echo of Reprisal, if you need to farm Tether on specifically Void, is pretty good because it increases the amount of super you get when you're surrounded. So yeah. Next we have Goldie crits plus Facet of Generosity. Facet of Generosity is a pretty clutch prismatic fragment. The way it works is when I think it's get like 8 red bar kills, but there's like a counter system. So I think some ads count for more than 1 out of 8 for that counter. You can produce 4 super orbs. Right, 4 super orbs is like I think about a quarter of your super or something like that. So a lot of super, right? And you can make 4 super orbs per person, right? That gets this amount of kills. So basically, what we have set up here is I pop Transcendence, and you have to be Transcendent while you're getting these kills. But I pop Transcendence, and my teammate pops Transcendence, and we kill these ads on the plate while we're transcendent, that makes like 8 orbs ideally, right? Maybe a little bit less, but 8 big super orbs. And then we use Goldie crits to produce even more orbs. And then watch this. The person who is this clip's perspective, you can see here, bang, 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 and then Goldie orbs, bang, full super, right? So Goldie crits plus generosity, also another way of getting your super. Mantle of Battle Harmony. This is what I use during Ron to get my super. A very kill efficient way of getting your super. There's a lot of things in Destiny that translate kills into super energy. Mantle of Battle Harmony is a very, very efficient way of not getting too many kills, but getting your super. And you don't get your super quickly because there's an internal cooldown to the effect, but you do get it pretty consistently, and you don't need to get as many kills. So you can kind of like space out your kills. So see, I make a finisher here, and then I kill, 1 ad, wait a little bit, kill 2 ad, wait a little bit, 3 ad, kill a little bit. Yeah, and then you can just get your super pretty consistently that way. And then finally, Vesper of Radius. Vesper of Radius with, triple dynamo, triple distribution, blah, blah, and then, Ember of Singeing, Ember of Benevolence, stuff like that. And you can see, he's surrounded by ads, so he's getting his Phoenix Dive back very quickly. Bang, Phoenix Dive, getting it back very quickly. And bang, Phoenix Dive again. So yeah, just a way of getting your well if you need it. Obviously only relevant on Warlock, and mostly just used to get wells, because Phoenix Dive has a lower cooldown than normal Rift, and it works on Solar, even though it's like supposed to be an arc exotic. So yeah, that's it for super generation. Let's talk about dying. There's 2 main methods of dying quickly now that self-damage is not as, I guess, easy to access. I mean, obviously you could just rocket the ground, but a lot of the time you're on a sword. So one of the most common ways is skating into a wall and then dying using any form of self-damage. So in this clip here, you'll see this person is throwing a crystal at the ground, and then they skate into the wall and they instantly shoot themselves with Mountaintop and die. So that's a pretty fast way to die. Pretty common, right? A lot of the time people, when they need to die quickly in a run, they'll just skate into a wall and shoot themselves. That's it. The other common way to die is using Ricochet Rounds. So there are slug shotguns in this game, so Ganora's Axe and Pure Recollection specifically, that if you shoot a wall with them, they can ricochet and you can die. You can die pretty quickly. Pure Recollection one-shots you if you have a low enough health stat, and Ganora's 2-shots you, but is maybe a little bit more controlled because you don't have to hit 2 of the shots, right? So here I just get myself to 1 HP, and then when I see the objective fade, I just shoot the ground, shoot the wall again to die quickly, right? So people used to use, like Mountaintop Forbearance and stuff like that, but the self-damage on those weapons was reduced drastically. And so this is a more reliable way of dying quickly now. Okay. People still use like Rocket's items and Rocket Pulses to die, but, it's not as fast, I guess. Okay, and then we're going to talk about breaches next. So breaches is breaching through a wall or some sort of barrier that you're not normally able to get through. And so we'll talk about a couple of those. I think there's like 5 that are relevant. So the first one here is called a barrier bypass, okay? Or this is, I guess like a super line into a barrier, whatever. I don't know. So we mentioned earlier that there's pushback barriers, right? And this is one of them right here above Shurichi, right? You can't really get over this area. It's a very big pushback. And so the way pushbacks work is that normally if you try to like sword through them, it'll just bounce you, rubber band you right back out, right? But supers, the way supers work is that they fix your position and your velocity for a fixed amount of time. So Silence and Squall is one of these supers. So watch this. This is the Blade Focus plus Eager Edge thing I was mentioning earlier. So Emmy here has Blade Focus, swaps to Eager Edge, swaps to the perk Eager Edge on the sword, and then does a skate. And you'll see here gets a crazy amount of momentum, transfers this momentum into a super animation, which locks her into this velocity and this trajectory for a moment, right? So right here is where she enters the pushback. And so casting Silence and Squall pushes her through enough of the pushback that she gets stuck in it, but stuck on the other side of the pushback. So she can slide out and it will let her free through this kind of barrier here. Okay. Next we have Finisher Breaching. Finisher Breaching is relatively recent, right? It was found a while ago, but it's found some much more application recently. And the way that it works is you finisher an ad right next to a thin wall. So for example, this wall over here, and you finisher the ad, and certain finishers like push your character forward at the end of the finisher. And what was missing here, people have tried this with thin walls all the time, but it generally snaps you back outside of the wall, is you blink. You blink after you finisher. And by blinking afterward, for whatever reason, it resets where it thinks your character is essentially, and like locks you in place behind the wall. Okay. So this doesn't work on most walls because they're too thick. But in some thin walls, it works. And when it does work, for example, you can use it to skip some of the portions that Bungie was, patching out and blocking in Vesper's entrance. And so you can actually, even in this particular instance, 2 people are finishing the same ad. So just like how Special Finisher and Benevolent Finisher, we talked about, multiple people can finisher the same ad and interact with it. 2 people can finisher the same ad and get out through the same wall at the same time. So that's pretty cool. Okay, next we have res breaching. Res breaching is super uncommon these days, but I will show you it regardless. Res breaching is, okay, actually this shows you 2 things. So the first thing is, remember how I said you can use Icarus Dash to get over like small humps or like get into crawl spaces that you normally wouldn't be able to? This is an example of doing that and using Salvation's Grip to do so that the crystal kind of acts as a second ground that you can kind of slide through. But res breaching is, and by the way, this is old Mountaintop damage, right? People used to die using like Mountaintop and it would do that much damage to you. But yeah, you'll see here that the person here, they have died and they've been rezzed and their ghost is kind of like half peeking through the floor here. And so the fact that it's half peeking through the floor allows them to spam jump and eventually wriggle free. So this is an example of a res breach. Now, very, very uncommon these days because this is very, very niche in its application. For starters, like it generally only works vertically. I mean, you can use it horizontally as well. It used to be used in Vogue, like you'd res breach through the door using like a Sparrow. But there are other ways of breaching and a far more expansive, toolkit in terms of getting oob and like, finding easier routing than just using a res breach. So not as common anymore, but definitely a tool that exists. Okay, 2 more types of breaches. The first one is a Sparrow breach. This one is very, very old tech, right? It's been in the game for a long time. There are not that many categories that use Sparrows, so Sparrow breaching is not that common to begin with. But in the ones that it exists in, there are thin walls that you can basically dodge, and you can jump and like dismount your Sparrow and dodge at the same time, or like in quick succession, in order to get out of some small walls. So you'll see here that this player just slides it aside, dodges, dismounts, and they're out. They're out of this wall because it's a thin wall. So yeah, that's a Sparrow breach. Next, we have Storm's Edge breaching. This one is actually, in my opinion, quite underutilized. Well, maybe not as much anymore, but this has a lot of applications, and it's found a lot of use in a bunch of different categories. And basically, there's like thin walls in this game where if you force your character into the hitbox of the wall and you cap your frames to 30, you can make your way out of the wall. So you'll see here, they actually clip into the inside of Riven's throat wall, just like that, using Storm's Edge, and now they're out of bounds. Now they're out of bounds on Queenswalk. So this is how out of bounds Queenswalk is done in Last Wish speedruns these days. So yeah, pretty cool. Storm's Edge breaching has some application in like Equilibrium and stuff, and Vespers as well, I believe. But this is like the most visually striking example I could find. So yeah. Okay, and then finally, the last mechanics clip I want to show you, or folder I want to show you, sorry, is warping. So warping, I mean, kind of a broad category, but I'll show you what it does. So death warping. I mentioned this earlier when we were talking about, I think it was Epic Desert. Yeah, it was. There was a clip of like Korgos or Gregos where I was showing you death warping. Death warping is basically this. Okay, whenever an encounter starts, and if your ghost is in a joining allies region and you're in the same load zone, right? So you don't actually get pulled, but your ghost is where the joining allies would be. Your ghost automatically gets pulled to the starting position of that encounter. So we have one person who actually, the POV you saw, the barrier surf POV, they were going to the encounter. Death warping makes it so that when they actually start that encounter, your ghost, instead of being on the ground in the joining allies area, it pulls you. It like joins you. It joining allies is your ghost to where the encounter starts. And unlike getting joining allies, which is like 11 seconds of just sitting there doing nothing, you can instantly respawn whenever your respawn timer is up. And now you're in the encounter. So that's what death warping is. So for example, in Epic Desert, in that Korgos clip that I showed you, if my teammates had not death warped and they got joining allies, the flag would be gone by the time that they were able to spawn it. Okay, so that's and death warping also obviously helps you get into the encounter faster, so you can actually do the mechanics. Okay, so that's death warping. Next we have I'm going to call this DSE, even though it doesn't have like an official name. We're calling it default spawn exploitation. And the way that default spawn exploitation works is actually quite simple. Okay, so whenever you enter a new load zone in Destiny, load zones, which are just basically big like encounter play spaces, I guess, like regions, physical regions on the map. So clarity control, restricted, like we talked about before. Whenever you enter a load zone, it has a default spawn, right? So like in case you die or get lost or whatever, and like the game doesn't know where to set your spawn, it's going to try to spawn you somewhere by default. Okay. And the thing is, this default spawn, it doesn't necessarily care where you came from. Now, in some load zones, it does. But in this particular instance, or sometimes it changes based on like what objective is happening during the encounter. But in this particular instance, right, going into restricted from the back, right? So you'll see here, he dies without touching the ground, so he doesn't set his spawn by accident. And when you'll see he hit restricted, right? So he went from clarity control, Atrax load zone, to restricted, security load zone, and he died. But he died hitting it from the back. So you might think, okay, maybe he spawns in like security or something. The default spawn for restricted is out here. Okay, so this is a great way of kind of covering a large distance, right, without having to actually like traverse through the entire area. Obviously, this doesn't apply to all load zones. Some load zones, the default spawn is like further forward, so it'd be less useful. But in Deep Zone Crypt, it happens to be outside of the oob, which is helpful because this means that he can backtrack, get a new Sparrow, and re-oob and continue the rest of his skip. Okay, so this is default spawn exploitation, basically abusing the fact that you know that the default spawn is going to be a certain area, and so you can die after hitting load zone without setting your spawn, and you'll go there by default. Okay, next we have DSM. DSM, this is called default spawn manipulation, so a different letter at the end there. And the way DSM works is, like I said, every load zone in Destiny has a default spawn, but some of them have fallback spawns. So if the default spawn is covered, or there's an enemy on it, or basically there's some reason the game doesn't want to spawn you in the default spawn, well, the game sometimes has fallback spawns. And so how best to explain this? Well, let me just show you. Okay, so the default spawn in Garden of Salvation first encounter load zone is in this big cave. Okay, it's in this big cave, and if you cover the entire ledge with crystals, with stasis crystals, instead of spawning on the crystals or in the crystals, because the entire spawn location is blocked, you will spawn in the fallback spawn. And the fallback spawn in Garden First is actually at the end of first encounter, down over here, leading into where the second encounter transition starts. So yeah, pretty cool. Right? That's what DSM is. There's multiple applications of DSM in a bunch of different raids and dungeons. It's not super common, but yeah, it does exist, and it's pretty interesting. Okay, next we have IRB. Okay, so IRB is maybe the most like complicated tech in Destiny 2 speedrunning. And it's actually almost not used at all. It's basically just used in Grasp of Avarice now, because even VOW, it's not used anymore. But here is what an IRB is. It's called an interdimensional res breach. The name is a bit misleading. Just call it an IRB. I don't know. Don't read too heavy into it. Okay. Basically, I've explained this in previous videos before in my raid speedrun breakdowns, but I'll explain it again here just for the sake of, you not having to go watch another video. Okay. So here's what an IRB is. In Destiny, there are different load zones, right? There's different load zones. There's in VOW, for example, there's like entrance, there's first encounter load zone, second encounter load zone, collection, for example, is the caretaker load zone. And you'll see that when you change load zones, the text in the bottom left changes, right? It's very cinematic, very cool. However, all of these load zones share the same set of physical coordinates. They share the same coordinate space, okay? So that means, for example, in this space, right, there can be a bunch of different load zones, right? So this set of coordinates can have a bunch of different things in a bunch of different load zones, right? So for example, if for somehow you were to get out of balance in Caretaker in the collection load zone, and you were to come, you had fly hacks or something, and you flew up to this area, it would not look like this, okay? So there's different assets loaded in different load zones. And this makes sense from a computational perspective, right? If you're a game developer, you don't want to have literally the entire map loaded at the same time, right? So you want to have wherever the player is, whatever's relevant to the player, you want that to be loaded, right? So that's why load zones exist, so that your computer doesn't have to have the entirety of VOW the Disciple loaded at the same time while you're playing the game, okay? So I did mention, though, that all of these load zones share the same coordinate space. And so what the interdimensional res breach is, the interdimensional part, is you are transposing the set of coordinates for a certain respawn point from one load zone to another one, okay? And there's 3 steps to how this works, okay? Very simple. The first, well, not very simple, but there's 3 steps, okay? The first step is you have to set your death somewhere, okay? You can set your death anywhere you want. It's called a global death point, okay? So the game is going to remember, for example, let's say you set your death at 6, 3, minus 200, okay? These are the coordinates, your XYZ coordinates in the entire map's, geometry play space, okay? And so Crow, he is going to set his death point right here. And let's say these are the coordinates, okay? The game is going to remember these coordinates, by the way. So his ghost, he's going to die, and he's going to get revived. His ghost is right there, okay? So just remember that. That's his global death point, okay? Now, the next thing that he's going to do is way off into the future. So he needs to not die again, by the way, because it's going to reset his global death point to a different place, wherever he dies next. So he needs to not die until he reaches this point of the raid. Now, if you don't recognize this area, this is one of the doorways between first and second encounter. And the reason why this doorway is important is because it is the boundary, the load zone boundary between acquisition, first encounter, and collection. So you'll see here, there's acquisition in the bottom left. He is in the first encounter load zone, and he is trying to enter the second encounter load zone. Okay, so imagine it like this. Entrance is Disciples Bog, right? That's the first entrance load zone, right? Then there's some overlap here where, it's called a hub where you pass through one load zone to the next. This is the acquisition load zone. And then this is the collection load zone. This is where Caretaker is, right? Now, Crow's destination, this player's destination, where he wants to end up after he respawns from this tech, is he needs to die to that load zone. He needs to die in the load zone where he wants to transpose the coordinates. So he took the coordinates from Disciples Bog, and he doesn't want to go to acquisition. He wants to end up in, 6 - 3, 200, or whatever the coordinates I said were. He wants to end up with that coordinate set in this load zone. And so he needs to die to this load zone. Now, this is a bit confusing. So there's another tech, not a tech, but it's like a thing that you can do in this game called death to load. So when you die in D2, obviously you can die to regular damage or whatever, but there's a special death with special conditions called a death to load. Okay. And there's 2 examples, including this Val one, that I'm going to explain to you to try to illustrate how this works. Okay. So a death to load is a special death where you are dying because you hit a load zone. You die because you hit a load zone. And when you hit that load zone, something about your character makes it so that the game is like, I'm not sure where to spawn you. And so it just kills you. Okay. I know that sounds weird, but it just kills you. Okay. And so in this particular instance, Crow is crouching very, very slowly with crystals above his head. And so when he spawns in this new load zone, the game is like, wait, I don't know where your character just went because there's crystals blocking off his last location. And so the game just kills him, right? And this is best done. Usually you want to be hitting a load zone from an unexpected angle, right? So there is a death to load, for example, in Deepstone Crypt, where you hit the restricted load zone from the back. Okay, so you go all the way around in out of bounds, and you hit the restricted load zone trigger from the other side from where the game expects you to hit it, right? So oftentimes hitting a load zone from the opposite side or with uncapped frames can cause you, or with high FPS, opposite side of the load zone where it doesn't expect you to hit the load zone, what can cause you to die to load, okay? And so dying to load has 2 special properties, okay? Number 1 is it inherits the conditions. Okay, actually, low-key, both properties are the same property. So when you die to load, your death will inherit the conditions of your last death, of your previous death, okay? So what do I mean by that? Number 1 is it will inherit the conditions of whether you were in a respawn restricted zone or if you were in a regular load zone the last time you died. And so if you guys have ever tried to do Garden Flawless Skip, right? And if you don't know what that is, you can look it up. But Garden Flawless Skip is essentially, there's a place top left on the entry to the transition to second encounter where you can sword into the second encounter load zone and the load zone instantly kills you. It's called a death to load, same thing, right? However, some people, after wiping first encounter, they try it again and they realize I can't respawn. It says, waiting for ally to revive you. The reason for this is because when you wipe, you died in a respawn restricted area. And because you died in a respawn restricted area, when you death to load, it thinks you're in, it carries the properties of your last death, which was in a respawn restricted area, and then you can't res yourself, right? So that's the first thing. The other thing is that it inherits the location properties of your last global death point. So in this example, this player's coordinates from entrance, from Disciples Bog, get transposed into the collection load zone. Because obviously the game is not going to just send you back to the entrance load zone. When I say it inherits the properties, it inherits the global coordinates. And so watch this. He melees, he's going to death to load, he's going to death to load. And now the important thing, remember how I said auto reses are different? I said auto reses are different from normal reses. If he tried to revive himself right now, he would just kind of be where he actually physically died. Okay. However, remember how I said auto reses try to res you exactly where your ghost is? His ghost got transposed with the global death coordinates of the entrance location. Okay. So the entrance location, remember that little kind of corner that he died in that previous clip that I showed you? If you transpose those coordinates to the collection load zone, it's like this random staircase all the way above Val, like out of bounds, but past the barrier that stops you from leaving Caretaker, which is the important thing. Okay. And so he was in his inventory when he saw his ghost move. But let me just tell you, his ghost was up here. His ghost was up here, and then he got auto-resed, and auto-res, unlike normal reses, try to res you exactly where your ghost is. And so he resed him up here. If he tried to res manually, he would have just been kind of normally resed, but now he's up here. Okay, so let's talk application. Obviously, IRBs, if you can set them up properly, which again, IRBs are maybe the hardest tech to figure out how to set up in this game, because the amount of planning they require to like figure out, you know, what corresponds to what is like pretty annoying, right? There's programs you can use, for example, like Alcahest, where you can view and transpose different load zones on top of each other and see what exactly corresponds to what, but it's still like very annoying to figure this out, right? Because like most skips in Destiny are like, okay, I'm gonna go out of bounds, or I'm gonna, you know, go past this encounter, and like I'm gonna go wait at the next encounter and pull people, right? Or like people are gonna leave rejoin. Very straightforward, right? You're literally just traversing through the raid even though you're out of bounds. This is completely different. This is like I'm literally gonna transpose my coordinates from one load zone, and I'm gonna plan ahead into maybe 2 encounters ahead or 3 encounters ahead, and I'm gonna reuse those coordinates to get me somewhere useful by depth to loading and auto-resing, right? So pretty complicated tech, and that's kind of why it's not used outside of circumstances that really call for it. And back then, there was like not really a feasible way to get up to that caretaker top floor and like finish the skip. And nowadays, with the more expanded like normal tech, like non-IRB tech that we have, like people just Storm's Edge breach through the ceiling for Vow 2-3 now. So it's, you know, pretty straightforward. It's a much shorter route and much less complicated to set up than this. But yeah, there's still some categories where like it's literally impossible to make a certain skip without using IRB. So Grasp of Avarice is a really good example. If you go and watch my breakdown of Grasp of Avarice, there is literally a captain inside of a box, multiple layers of boxes, completely out of bounds. And the only way for you to get in, you can't really breach in realistically. The only way for you to get in is to transpose coordinates directly into that box, right? So you literally spawn inside of the box because it's a closed off box, right? You can't really breach into it. So yeah, that's an example of a place where IRB might still be used because it's an extremely special case. But most of the time, you know, there's other ways of just doing a traditional skip instead. Okay, last but not least, we have Rejoin Inheritance. Okay, Rejoin Inheritance. I'm going to use a Salvation's clip. I'm going to use a Salvation's Edge clip here. Rejoin Inheritance is basically abusing the fact that even if one member of your fire team is split off from the rest of the members of the fire team, let's say 5 people or 4 people are in an encounter, and one person has left to go on skip. Whenever you rejoin a fire team in Destiny, it puts you in the default spawn. Remember, we talked about default spawns and load zones. It puts you in the default spawn location of the fire team leader, even if the fire team leader is not in the currently ongoing encounter. Now, obviously, this is useful if you want people to rejoin on the fire team leader and spawn in like ahead of the currently progressing encounter. But another fact here is joining allies. Okay, so maybe you're going on a skip and you're going to get pulled. For example, the top right POV here, who is the skipper, they're in Witness right now, right? They're in the Zenith load zone, and they're going to get pulled down to Verity, right? And how do you make it so that they either don't get pulled or someone else can go up to Zenith? Well, let me tell you right now, it's not really realistic for the player in the top right to cancel their joining because the joining in Verity, I think, is like fairly long. So it's not really realistic for them to cancel joining. However, what they can do, another feature of this game, is that when you join a fire team, whenever your ship fully merges with the roster, you're considered in the fire team. Like you spawn in technically into the game. Okay. And so even if the person who you're joining on gets joining allies, as long as your character is merged with the fire team, when the fire team leader is in a load zone, even if by the time you spawn in, they leave that load zone because they got joined, you will spawn in there. So the game decides where to spawn you when you join someone at the moment that you merge rosters with the fire team. So I want you to watch this. You ready? They're going to start Verity here shortly. Okay. This guy joins in the top left. Little dancing going on in the top right. And they start Verity at a certain moment. They're timing everything so, you know, the skip goes correctly. And boom, you see that? Joining allies. Joining allies. So this person's screen is going to go fully black. They're going to be in Verity. They're going to be in Verity. Watch this. They're getting joining allies. They're in Verity. And look where the person in the top left spawns. Bang. In Witness. Even though nobody else is in Witness right now. So very, very useful for dodging joining. This is used in VOG as well. During Templar, people rejoin and they spawn into the Gorgon maze while the skipper themselves gets joined. So yeah, very, very useful. Obviously requires some precise timing, and that's why they were delaying starting the encounter. It requires some precise timing to get this to work. But yeah, pretty cool stuff. Okay, so that's it for mechanics, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check. Yeah, there's no more categories. All right, we're going to move on to our last category, which is maybe the most boring one, which is called kills. So we're going to go back to the slideshow, which I think is kind of useless, to be honest, because I'm just showing you videos, but it's fine. All right, let's talk about kills. Kills, let's talk about ad clear first. Let's talk about ad clear. What do we got in ad clear? Let's take a look here. Okay, let's go alphabetical. So, Speedrunner Classic, Anarchy, right? Anarchy often used to trap doors. Anarchy is very player efficient, right? So if you have a bunch of spawns you need to watch, you can also place Anarchy in the middle of like a small spawn. So for example, like if a Taken Blight is spawning, you know the ads are spawning 1, 2, 3, you can place an Anarchy like right there, and it'll kill everything and just tick in like a circle. So it's also used for that. But yeah, Anarchy, Classic, and speedrunning, if you have a bunch of doors you need to cover and only a couple players, pretty good. And obviously if you need to go and interact with mechanics, aka in Descent, Anarchy is great for that too. Okay, next we have area denials. Area denials have a cool feature where they can vertically clip through floors and hit ads that are inside of a floor. And so area denial is used for that. It's also used in Gauss, as I'm sure you know, to open boxes without actually, you know, having those boxes able to be opened because you finished killing all the ads and killed the angelic. So yeah, it's used for that as well. But area denials are also just generally good at, you know, killing ads, you know, even if you're not using them to kill ads through a floor or something like that. So this is out of bounds in VOG. These are some of the rooms that the ads emerge from. Choir of One. Choir of One is a pretty useful weapon in speedrunning because it essentially acts like a sniper with lower zoom, and it's like easier to use, and you know it's like very high fire rate. You can kill individual ads very quickly. Now obviously it's not as fast if you need to kill a bunch of ads instantly, like not as fast as like a rocket or a rocket pulse. But in instances like Shirochi, for example, where we're trying to kill specifically exactly 2 ads at a certain timer, and then we could just kill the rest instantly, it's good for that, right? So it's basically, people used to use like 140 snipers for stuff like this, and then Choir is kind of taken over because it's just a higher quality of life version. Okay, next we have Gallahorn. Yeah, Gallahorn is if you ever need to like nuke an entire room of ads, yeah, that's what Gallahorn is for. So, you know, red bars, orange bars, yellow bars, green bars, blue bars, whatever you got, Galley is good for that. Okay, Graviton Lance. This is kind of an interesting one. If you ever need to kill like a really big group of ads, but you only have a short moment to shoot something at them and you don't want to be on a rocket, which is again very, very rare that that circumstance occurs, Graviton Lance is pretty interesting. Because, you know, the way, I mean, he only kills 1 ad there, but you can see all the numbers on his screen. He's like, you know, blowing up all the ads, and his teammates are obviously helping a little bit here, but it's a fire starter. You know, it's an interesting fire starter. Okay, next we have Legendary Heavy GLs. Yeah, this one's a classic, right? Vault Encounter, Legendary Heavy GLs, you know, iconic duo, bang, bang, you know, good for just nuking instantly like a group of ads. Legendary Rockets, yeah. Often used with Bipod and Pack Hunter, you know, if you want to kill like a really big group of ads around corners, you know, just splashing stuff. Good for that, right? Good for that. Also, Legendary Rockets can sometimes be used like Legendary Heavy GLs, where you kind of just shoot them at the ground in the middle of a spawn that you know is going to appear. Rocket Pulses. Yeah, this is not the greatest clip. I just found a random clip of a Rocket Pulse being used, but yeah, I mean, just, you know, they're Rocket Pulses. I don't know what to tell you. They're fast at killing ads. You can kind of spread their shots. Rocket Sidearm, another classic here. I mean, these days you might even use like a Rocket Pulse here. I mean, actually, no, you probably use a Rocket Sidearm because you want to like shoot the conductors and stuff. And then Trinity Ghoul. Trinity Ghoul is, despite being a primary, as I think it's like the only primary on this list actually, besides Graviton Lance, it's still very good at like killing groups of ads when you have a sword on and those ads are like spread out and you don't really want to aim. You just want to shoot kind of indiscriminately and just kind of hip fire and be running around really quickly. Trinity is just like super like brain dead splash ad clear, so it's used for some stuff still. And then finally Waveframes. Yeah, still used in Gauss, right? Because all the ad spawns are like linear. So yeah, Waveframes, classic in Gauss. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Okay, next we have mini boss kills. Mini boss kills. What do we got in mini boss kills? We have Gallahorn, unsurprising. Yeah, there's a thing you can do in Crota here where you like shoot Galley through like a hole in the ceiling here and it kills the knights. I don't know, random clip. Grapple melee, which like you know, you can also use to nuke mini bosses. I don't know. Grapple melee tends to have like an animation, so it's not as fast or as instant as, you know, using a rocket or something like that, but I've seen some people like in some speedruns use like Navigator or something, and especially in like solos, for example, and just like repeatedly grapple melee ads or mini bosses or whatever. So it can be used. Horseman, classic in speedrunning for killing mini bosses. Here's an example from Vow entrance. Bang, right? Izanagi and Nighthawk, also classics. This is both of them combined. Izzy, bang, Nighthawk, bang. Yep, classic. Recombination Mountaintop. This is from like before the power changes, so maybe not as relevant these days, but you know, Recombination Mountaintop, pretty decent. Rocket Pulses. Yeah, I don't think I really need to explain this one to you. Rocket Pulses are in fact good at killing mini bosses. For example, the Minotaurs in Garden of Salvation. Yep. Okay, Still Hunt Nighthawk. Again, Still Hunt kind of serves a similar purpose to Izzy, right? Still Hunt, bang, bang, bang. Okay, there you go. And then finally, Tessellation. Yeah, Tessellation, great for when you can't really aim like super well at a mini boss, or like you want to just splash the ground under its feet and still do high damage. Example here, he's like flying through the air. You see the Tessellation projectile hits there, and then he finishes it off with Rocket Pulse. And normally that guy's killed with Horseman, with like 2 mags of Horseman. But yeah, this is definitely faster. He barely touches the ground, and the guy's already dead. So pretty cool. All right, what's next? We got boss kills. Boss kills, because metas change all the time, I'm not going to show you like specific stuff, but I'll show you like patterns that people use. So Lumina plus Legendary, pretty common, right? Shoot Lumina at people, because a lot of the time, Legendary heavies tend to be very strong in this game, right? So Lumina is a good pairing with them in speedruns where you have the opportunity to get noble rounds, and you don't really need like another exotic weapon on for survivability purposes or whatever, because you have things planned out. So yeah. And then Parasite plus Super, another classic here. Highest burst damage you can do to a boss these days, and for bosses that don't have a lot of health, like Morgith, you know, it's like a good way of killing them quickly. Whirling Ovation for final stands. This is used on like Riven and Explicator. So Explicator I'm showing you right now. Final stand starts, you pre-charge your Whirling Ovation, bang, boss is dead, right? And then finally, Edge of Action. Edge of Action, this is like the recent, I think, King's Fall record. Yeah, Edge of Action, cool thing you can do with it. Obviously, it gives you Void Overshield, but also gives you a 5% universally stacking damage buff. You can shoot it and break it yourself using your own weapons, and the game will act like the Edge of Action bubble is still there until it would normally time out naturally. And so even if, you know, the boss is shooting at where the bubble was, it's not there anymore, it can't take damage, and you can just sit there for like a zone of fake protection. Well, not fake, it's real protection. It acts like it's still there. But you can sit there in the where the bubble was, and it will act like the bubble is there, including the damage boost. So pretty cool. Okay, so we've gone over mini boss kills, ad clear. Let's talk about object kills. Yeah, if there's an object-based boss, you know, you got Horseman. Whenever he gets the call to shoot one. Okay, there we go. One, boom. Yeah, Horseman. Wardcliff, which is not used as much anymore, but Wardcliff, that exists. You have Bastion, which again, not used that much anymore because a certain exotic weapon, you'll never guess which one, has kind of taken over the roles of all three of these for object kills. And that's our good friend, Choir of One. Especially if you have the time, you can stack Onslaught, and bang, look at that. Absolute nuke down the fuses right there. Right? Okay, so yeah, that's object kills. And yeah, last but not least, we're going to go over some miscellaneous stuff, right? In speedrunning, a lot of the time people will do this thing where they shoot Galley into the air, give their teammates Galley, and then swap to something else, like their own legendary rocket or tractor or something. And then there's also debuff extension, which this is an example that I found earlier. This is a person who's on skip who is applying tractor, and then they use a Withering Gaze GL. And because this boss doesn't normally, it can't take impact damage outside of damage, like in the middle of its chest, but you can use explosive damage. He just uses a Withering Gaze GL to extend tractor for like a long time, and then uses a Withering Gaze sniper to take gaze and further extend tractor. So yeah, pretty cool. Debuff extension. I mean, I'm sure you guys have, I made a video on debuff extension, but yeah, people do this with Felwinter and tractor in speedrunning because speedrunning is the place to do it because you can kind of optimize the scenario and you have controlled variables. So yeah. All right, that is pretty much it, guys. I'm gonna have to edit this video a lot for it to be watchable because there was a lot of explaining and stuff, but I hope you guys enjoyed. I know it was not super like edited or crazy or anything, and the slideshow was very, very straightforward, and it was mostly just me talking over videos, but I've never made a video that goes over really all the stuff that people have in their toolkit when they're speedrunning. So hopefully, if you're a speedrunner, there's maybe some things that you haven't considered for skip routing or encounter strats or whatever. And if you're not a speedrunner, hopefully you just found this interesting, because there's a lot of stuff. For example, like I'm sure Benevolent Finisher spamming was not something most people know about, at least. So, I wanted to show you guys some cool stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Have a good one.